o happy wena mo relationshipeng I love ebile nna one step ke boetse off the pitch sports show mo channel 263 mo DSTV wa bona ha ke botse show relationship company meshem ebile mfe break ai sing break mpe after school once ke rata di joke ai wena mara baby girl ke re ke boetse off the pitch sports show mo channel 263 mo DSTV my love I shem company ke be singele hape nna I don't care I really I don't care shem on dropela phone hello I what's this show shem I go catch him chin company ke be singele hape mojolo the dating.
Man, oh man, that was comedy there for Mavusana. Probably one of the funniest men in South Africa. Definitely check him out. Welcome. This is Off the Pitch Sports Show, and we've got a bumper edition for you this afternoon. And sitting next to me, a gentleman, they call him what? The former head of SABC Sports, Mr. Gary Rathbone. How are you doing?
Pretty good. Nice to be here.
Absolutely brilliant. I mean, to see you wearing red, I won't ask you which team you're supporting, but Gary, maybe just for some of our viewers, maybe who haven't been familiar with you, I mean, I've been chasing you for a couple of years, wanting you to get on the show and just to talk about, I mean, your knowledge and wisdom with regards to sport. Maybe just give the viewers an indication of who you are, your background within sports. I mean, I know a lot of people are dying to hear from you.
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, I've been involved in the sports media broadcasting side of business in Africa for like it's over 25 years now. Back in the 90s, started doing work. One of the first things I worked on was created, produced and researched on the really wonderful Orlando Pirates documentary called The Impossible Dream, based around that team that won the African Cup back then, and then provided a big backbone for the team that went on, the national team that went on to win the Nations Cup.
Yes.
And you know what I mean. So, and I used to do a lot of, so I've been in sports and production. One of the big things I did was created in 1999 with a friend of mine, colleague back then, Aubrey Tao, who now is doing a very successful business running Mojo I Love on DSTV.
Brilliant.
But Aubrey and I started a thing called the African Soccer Show way back then, which was a dream we always had, is to create a show that focused on African football, so football from around the continent. And we had it broadcast in 26 different countries across the continent. And we also approached CAF, and we created and set up for CAF the African Player of the Year award events. So that whole thing was created by Aubrey and I back in 1999, 2000. We had the first ever African Player of the Year awards, African Player of the Year awards events held here in South Africa. I ran that thing for 5 years for CAF. Then they, Nigerians came with lots of money and took it away, and we never saw it again. And then I moved to SuperSport, produced a show called Football Africa for a couple of years.
So your strength is, I mean, been a lot in the production side as well as obviously the TV and African football side.
Well, exactly. Well, African football certainly, has been a key thing for me all my life, and the thing is that it was production up until the point in 2008 when SuperSport came to me and said they needed to get someone to run the SuperSport business outside of South Africa, and they needed to appoint what they call the head of Africa, which is a bit of a strange thing because I think most people forget that South Africa is also in Africa as well. So people outside of used to run to me and look at my business card and say, head of Africa.
True.
Yeah, so it means you think you're running the whole, and I said, no, just outside of South Africa.
Outside of South Africa, but on the continent.
Yeah.
So how do you assess, I mean, African football to date? I mean, how it's done. I mean, you look at how we've been competing in World Cups, obviously not getting to the semi-final. But just in the last 10, 20 years, how do you see African football progressed?
Well, it's been. I mean, the potential. We've had a lot of great players, we've had a lot of great moments, and it's been. It's never boring. It's always been interesting, and if you take the time to look at football across the continent, football as a whole, rather than just the game in your own country, it's a very rewarding and interesting experience. But I think that by and large, there was a lot of potential in the game that was around in the sort of 80s, the late 70s and the 80s, and where it was going, and early 90s. And then I think a combination of the creation of the English Premier League at the same time as SuperSport comes into the equation and starts offering this content to millions of people, and just basically, I think largely the failure of administrators around the continent to actually manage the game in their countries properly. And really has, you know, we've lost our way a lot. So by the time we get to the 2000s and the 2010s and now basically, you know, I think that in many ways African football, you know, across the continent has gone backwards.
Wow.
And I think that it's, you know what I mean, we really need to find leadership and sort of moral guidance to kind of get the game back on track again, because we've got a lot of potential.
100%.
And unfortunately, because of in that period of weakness, has allowed Europe and European teams and European thing to come in and basically eat our lunch for us. and you see all these top players in France and England and Germany and Italy now, the African players, you know, there's no doubt we've got the talent, but we don't have the administrations and the structures
to put
back
it
home
together and make it
to allow them to develop them into that. And then we flood the broadcasting, you know, areas are flooded with the European game. We don't see enough of the African game. When I used to have a show, so one of the things that I did, you know, I talked about the African soccer show. That was the first ever show that looked at football from a Pan-African perspective. And it was great, so that people would be able to see for the first time. If you're in South Africa, you could see teams in Nigeria or Congo or Kenya or whatever, and people in Kenya could see teams in South Africa and Egypt and that, you get that experience and understanding the appreciation of the game as a whole. And I think that is one of the things in the media space we need to do, bring back, start showing people need to start getting excited, not just about your local team in your local Kazi, but the teams around the continent.
Absolutely brilliant. In the second segment, we'll still be chatting to Gary with all things SABC, his former position. But get in touch with us on our YouTube page, and don't forget classicshirts.co.za. We've got some absolutely fantastic prizes coming up. Stay tuned. Still here on Off the Pitch, chatting all things SABC, and Gary Rathbone with all things with regards to football on the continent and sports and broadcast and sponsorship. So Gary, let's get into it. Your previous role at the SABC, you resigned about 2 weeks ago now. What was your role entailing? What were you mandated to do? You were there for just over 2 years. Just give us an idea of exactly what you were tasked to do.
So yeah, I mean, I was brought on board basically to help bring SABC Sport back into, you know, make it a decent proposition. And honestly, it was an exciting job. It was a challenging job in many ways, but it was very, very rewarding. And as I've said to people, I felt it very much as a privilege to do that, because what you're doing is out there, you're building a sporting, you know, a sports proposition for content, good content, for all those millions of South Africans that can't afford to pay a subscription fee to get that content. And the fact that we managed to build something quite strong, I think, has been, it's an achievement I'm very happy with. But that was essentially what I need to do, is come and say, okay, let's rebuild SABC Sport, let's create something that can go on air, and mainly was to set up the SABC Sports channel.
Some
because
of the
talk
rights
about
that you
that
had,
for a
I
long
mean,
time, we finally did it.
You mentioned EPL, I think there was Bundesliga. What are some of the properties that you were able to acquire? How did you find the money for something like that?
Well, the thing is, that's the key thing, because we didn't have very little money. So it was, you know, trying to find, firstly, to try and negotiate deals that were, you know, that we could afford, so I can kind of get so trying to get good content on board that without actually having to pay a lot of money. And I was fortunate because a lot of things like the Bundesliga, like the top 14 rugby, international events like that, and even Formula E and those sports that we brought on board, that we could come and say to them, you know, look, you guys want to get into the South African market. We've got the audience, we don't have the money. You know, let's give me a price. This is what I can afford. Give it to me at that price, and you will see the value that you'll get in the audiences. And as we build it, and when things get better, you know, we can increase those fees as they go along. So I managed to get a lot of properties on board at a very low cost. You know, actually, the deal we did with CAF, which was for 2 years, that included the CAF Champions Leagues, Women's Champions League, the AFCON, Women's AFCON, Confederation Cup, all those 445 games altogether.
Brilliant.
And it was a 2-year deal, and it was, and what I actually got it for, you know, I think it was quite a.
You'll tell me off air.
I'll have to tell you off air, But I mean, I saw Lux September a couple of weeks back, and he said to me, he said he knows what I pay for it. He said if any of those, if Supersport and everybody else or anybody find out what you paid for that deal, he said they're going to take me out and shoot me, basically.
Sure, so you're a good negotiator. You're a good.
Well, it's not just a negotiator.
Yeah.
It's being in the business for like 25
Yes,
years. You know,
yes.
you know people, you know what people are looking for and what needs to be done to make it work. And and when you say to people, look, I need it at this price because that's what we can afford to make, people take you seriously.
Yeah.
They know you're not trying to kind of rip them off,
Yes.
basically.
So
If I
the
say,
channel
look,
must be-
if I say that's what I
Yes.
can afford, a lot of people will believe me.
The channel must be very upset that you left. I mean, but let's talk
Well-
about that now. Your new venture.
Yeah.
What have you got on the cards? I saw you posting that there's something exciting coming up for you.
Yeah. Well, I've actually started my own operation now called Sportscape Media,
Okay.
and what I want to get out there now do is try and actually help a lot of elements take that next step in terms of building our sports proposition for South Africa on a broader scale. You know, the thing about sport and sports media as a whole, I mean, to me, there's two things. Firstly, there's no doubt about it. The interest from a sponsorship point of view and the interest in viewership is huge, but it's not really, particularly in the free-to-air space where people can access content for free, we're not getting the most out of it. And I think there's a lot to be done in terms of bringing more money into the free-to-air space, more audiences with better content and trying to do all that. The other part of it is the fact that we're looking at the way that the media landscape is changing because of the digital transition.
You and I spoke about that off air to say, how is YouTube and that disrupting or maybe complementing some of the things?
Exactly. So that the whole space is changing. It's not the whole linear thing anymore, you know, and so it's trying to find ways to make that work better, more effectively in terms both of how do the audiences, giving audiences something better to engage with and worth their while, making it work with the telcos or whoever it is that have got to provide the data cost to make it affordable, and then finding and giving it, making it, dynamic enough for sponsors to say, okay, we need to put our money in there because that's how we can reach our audiences. So those are the areas that I really want to kind of focus on. That's what Sportscape Media is going to be about. What I like to say, it's really trying to start joining the dots
100%,
for a lot of people,
100%.
basically.
Gary, I mean, one of the things that really irks us on the show is that we look at some of the PSL clubs who are failing to get sponsors, but obviously they are on, the big pay platforms with regards to audiences, so they have the viewership. But what is it within those PSL clubs that they're failing to get sponsors?
Well, the thing is right there. You talk about being on the big pay TV platforms. They're getting viewers. They're not getting viewers. The viewers on the pay TV platforms are minuscule. Absolutely minuscule. I had the FA Women's Super League, which is the women Chelsea and Manchester United women's teams and things like that, and Arsenal. I have better numbers on those games sometimes
from a free-to-air perspective,
than some of the Premier League, the English Premier League games get on SuperSport.
The growth of women's, the women's game.
No, it's not that because it's the SABC, because free to air.
Yes.
When we ran the Bundesliga, we started launching the Bundesliga. I remember saying to somebody, I said, I reckon that by the end of the year, with the Bundesliga, I'll have a bigger audience with the Bundesliga than SuperSport get with the English Premier League.
I see.
And I was wrong.
I see.
We beat them in the first week already, basically.
Wow.
So it is actually.
So this also talks to
the problem with this is the problem with the PSL is that because they've sold everything to SuperSport and put everything behind the paywall, so it's fine for the big teams because they'll always get what they want.
But the smaller
teams, there's no way. How do they actually make their money? Because the sponsors look at them saying, "But you've got like 20,000 people watching you. Why? Where's the money? Where's the value for us? You know."
So that's actually the crux: is that they might have the audiences, or perhaps on SuperSport, but when it comes to SABC, they just do not have
absolutely.
those numbers.
They don't really have the reach, and that's why these things have got to open up. Rugby's another good example as well. I mean, I had the French top 14 on SABC too. And again, I was getting numbers on that. Just like, Currie Cup wasn't even coming close, basically.
Wow.
We've got a thing called the Heritage Cup, which is going to be another big thing coming up on the SABC. So watch the space. It's based around the whole. We've actually been broadcasting for a year already on SABC, but it's based on the amateur clubs like the Pirates and the Dispatch and all the clubs in Eastern Cape and Western Cape and KZN and in Gauteng and stuff like that. And there's huge audiences for that. And again, even that only on the sports channel, not even on an SABC 1, 2, and 3. Okay, bigger numbers than the Curry
Absolutely
Cup
brilliant.
and the URs, your United Rugby Championship and all the stuff on
Absolutely
Supersport.
brilliant.
Supersport Rugby doesn't come close to what we can offer on the SABC.
Wow, Gary, so much wealth of knowledge that you possess within you. But Gary, we're going to have to love and leave you now. So definitely, let's be in touch maybe in the next couple of episodes. There's
For
still
sure.
so much to unpack. You're wearing red, so I'm assuming you're a Liverpool fan. We'll get to that separately. But stay tuned. Mpumi Manyisi with all things sports and journalism. Stay tuned. Welcome back, segment 3. In segment 1 and 2, we were with Gary Rathbone, the former head of sports for the SABC. Man, oh man, so much wisdom, so much knowledge, so much encouragement with regards to what's happening within media, within broadcast, with rights, with deals. So stay tuned to see what we're going to be discussing a lot with Gary Rathbone. But she's back with a fresh cut. It's been a while since we've had her in the show. Mpumi, you've been away from us for a while, but how are you doing?
I know. I'm just wondering, what did it take for me to get back here?
Yeah,
To
no,
get a
we
call
thought,
up.
you know, with everything that's happening, I think we need to bring you in. I mean, I'm seeing you posting with Dr. Kumalo and all these things. About 2 weeks ago, you were there at the SABC for the big announcement, obviously, with the FIFA World Cup. I mean, tell us, what have you been up to?
Yeah, man, the FIFA World Cup season
Yeah.
is back, and that's where we're at. We
Yeah.
just want to see in terms of whether our favorite teams are going to
Yes.
make it to either the semi-finals or straight up to
We
the
have to.
finals.
The
You know,
continent has to.
obviously the favorites, Brazil,
Yeah.
Germany,
Yes, yes.
Belgium,
The
and
big
so
boys.
forth. Unfortunately, our boys are not going to be there. But
Sure,
however,
sure.
we've got Banyana representing us
Yes.
next year at the women's edition in
Yes.
Australia, which
Yes.
is super awesome.
Brilliant.
But yeah, that's what we've been up to,
to.
you know, chasing stories and just doing the work.
How did you get into this whole sports journalism space? I mean, is it something that you studied? Maybe for some of the young people watching the show who maybe want to do what you're doing. I mean, you are now like all over the place doing well. Congratulations as well for everything that you're doing. How did you get into it? What was your passion that drove it? And, you know, where you are today?
I think I got into the space by default. I had no
Yeah.
ambitions of
Okay.
being a journalist
Okay.
overall.
Okay.
I just wanted to be on radio,
Yes.
and but I couldn't get a radio gig.
Okay. Okay.
So one time, a local station was looking for a sports presenter.
Okay.
And I was just like, okay, maybe let me audition.
Okay.
And then who knows, I might get like a proper radio gig
Sharp,
via that. So
sharp,
it
sharp.
wasn't my intention to get
Okay.
into sports, literally.
But you've always
And
been a fan
luckily,
of sports,
I've
though.
always been
Played
a
it
fan
when you were
because
young.
I'm the only girl
Yeah.
at home amongst
Okay.
boys.
Okay.
So I was forced to watch the games. So now
Sure.
it's either I watch the games and teach myself
Sure.
the rules of the games,
Okay.
so that at least I also have something to watch.
To
Otherwise,
contribute
then
when
I have nothing to watch
at
'cause they're
home when
always
there's league. I
on.
mean, there's a derby coming up, so I'm sure in your household people were
Yeah.
either Chiefs or Pirates.
100%. We have Chiefs and Pirates fans, so
Sure.
it was just always that vibe.
And you got the gig.
I got the
eventually.
gig.
Okay, and
that's,
then
that's how it started.
how was the progression
then-
from there?
It was beautiful because I started out during the 2010 World Cup.
Yeah.
So it was everything football, it was everything sport at
Yeah.
the time. The vibe was super amazing.
Yeah.
So for me, it was a perfect time to learn because everybody was talking football at the time,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know. So it was a common language because
100%.
of the World Cup.
100%.
So it was easy for me to adapt and sort of learn. And everybody, even journalists, were forced to dig deep at the time
Okay,
to learn
okay.
more. So it wasn't an isolated project for me.
I see,
We were all
I
as
see,
journalists trying to
see.
learn more because
see.
now the World Cup was in our country.
I see.
And as we deliver, we needed to deliver sound information.
I see.
You know what I mean? So that's how it started. And eventually I went to Boston Media
Okay, okay.
to study journalism. And then I could call myself a full-on professional
A
journalist.
full-on professional
Yeah.
journal. We're chatting
Yeah.
all things journalism here with Mpumi Manyisi. But talk to me. I mean, I often ask Diani, you know, the age we're in with social media where so many people are creating content with regards to players' movements or what's happening in the sport. Has that disrupted the journals like yourself and Diani, where literally anyone who has a passion, is following sports, can kind of be a journalist themselves? I know Obviously, you wouldn't like to agree with that, but what does that look like at the moment? The impact of social media.
Talking about Diana, shout out to him. He gave me the opportunity to write my first article for Far Post.
Okay, okay.
And that's the reason why I won the G Sports.
I see, I see.
Yeah, with that out of the way,
okay.
I think it's sad, man. We in an industry that is not respected.
Okay.
We don't have the privileges that other industries have.
Okay.
Like if you're a lawyer, not anybody can jump in and want to be a lawyer.
That's true.
If you're a doctor,
That's
not
true.
everybody can want to jump in and want to be a doctor.
Well, I'm sure you can find some dodgy ones out there.
But everybody wants to be a general. Everybody has something to
What
say.
is it,
Everybody
though, about
has
that? Is it
something
just
to
that
write.
I'm
It's
a
because-
passionate sports football person and I know who's moving where. I know Haaland is being signed and I can just literally tweet and have a following. And that makes you someone who's credible, that studied for it and all of that. People are not sure, okay, who am I actually following here and who should I follow?
But which is good.
Yeah.
You know, it's mostly fans and people who
Yes.
just love the game and who want
Yes.
to express themselves. The only thing that goes wrong is when they want to share information that's
False
not
news.
credible,
I see.
false news and stuff that's not newsworthy
I
and
see.
that sort of stuff, which is good for us because that's where we come in.
As the credible source.
Yes,
Yeah.
we lay it out differently.
Yes.
You know, our stuff has more meat, is more
see.
credible. We have sources that people don't
Yeah,
have.
you're talking
and
about meat and sauces. I mean, we're going to have lunch after this one.
100%. So,
Yeah.
And this is the time for journals to sort of find a space where you're able to be different, be unique in your deliverance in terms of how you share your news, how you write your stories, because everybody's a writer now. But
see,
what
I
separates
see.
you from the rest?
I see that, but Mpumi, tell me, are you focusing predominantly on football? I mean, you're a sports journalist. Does that mean you focus on all sporting codes as well, men and women, or how does that look like?
Professionally, I'm a sports journalist.
Yes.
I cover everything as far as sports broadcasting is concerned. However, I am a football writer when it comes to writing. That's the only thing I write. I mainly write about women's football. A couple of months back, I broke a story about Mamelodi Sundowns. The sports ministry had not paid them the money that they had promised them.
Wow,
And then the
yes, I
story
heard about
blew
that.
up. You heard about
Oh,
that.
that's you. Wow, okay, absolutely
The story
brilliant.
blew up and people started saying, who is this? Clearly they like attention
Oh,
or whatever the
wow,
case may be.
okay. You were trending,
I
as they
was
like to
trending
say.
at the time. So in my defense, I was saying, I've been writing women's football for
I
the longest
see,
time.
I
It's
see.
just that you happen to bump onto this particular
at that
story
particular time.
and you're
I see.
thinking I did this for clout. I've been
I
writing
see.
about women's football all the time. You just haven't seen my other articles.
But Mpumi, I want to go deeper into that. But let the viewers at home obviously catch us on a separate platform on our YouTube channel to discuss all things with regards to that particular story. But thank you so much at home for joining us off the pitch. We'll see you same time, same place next week. We out.